Hello and welcome to How Would You Rate Your Pain? We will be exploring life, loss, love, and the power of resilience. I am Dr. Tiffany Bartell. Thank you for listening, and I can't wait to go on this journey with you. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of How Would You Rate Your Pain? I am so excited for today's guest. This is a dear friend and relative and one of my favorite people to brainstorm with. Victor, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. I appreciate you having me.
Okay, so your name is Victor Nava. I call you Vic a lot. Introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So, yes, Victor Nava. I'm from a little bit of everywhere. I grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina, born in Mexico City. My parents are originally from Northern California, the Sacramento and Roseville area. My great-grandparents on my mom's side were in the Roseville area in the early 1920-ish time frame, which Roseville is a railroad town. My dad's side of the family is from the state of Zacatecas, Mexico. Um, and so, yeah, so I have ties and roots to a lot of places, and definitely a lot of all of that has influenced me in who I am today in many different ways, of course. I am married. I have my beautiful wife, Jennifer, and my two boys. I have a 18-year-old Tristan and a 15-year-old Lucas, which crazy to think, but before the end of the year, each of them will have their birthday. So a 16 and 19-year-old before the end of the year. So
Goes by
my
really, really
parents.
fast.
Yes, it does. So I now live in Roseville and have lived here since 2000 because of wanting to be closer to my family, my extended family, who I never really lived near growing up. Like I said, I grew up in Wilmington, a coastal town in the southeast part of North Carolina, because my dad's work took us out there when I was about 5 years old. So, and grew up there, and it was an original 5-year plan turned into almost 20, and so that's where I was raised. So yeah.
I did not realize you had such a early history in California with your family. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So my mom's maternal grandparents. So my great grandfather, he worked for the railroad here in Roseville. So the train tracks run right through the town, and so much so that the town name was called Junction at one point. And so my great grandparents, yeah, they lived in a little two-bedroom home. Once they got their home, I learned growing up that my grandmother was actually lived a little bit in what was called the railroad housing for the employees. They were box cars, and so a lot of simple origins, I guess, to my family, for my family, and then of course my dad's family, very simple as well. Actually, my dad was actually born in New Mexico, but his dad was actually born in Ogden, Utah, because of my great grandfather on that side of the family that was working across the border until he fell ill. And so, although my grandfather, who actually is still alive, 95, and still, you know, pushing through. He, my grandfather was born in the U.S. and then went back to Mexico because of his dad falling ill around 2, 3 years old. And so my grandfather grew up in Mexico, but after he got married to my grandmother, they came to California to find a better life and find work. So yeah.
That's such a rich history, and I love that you have so many details about, your family. I think that, one of the things I've noticed in our relationship is you are a really good listener, and so I'm sure that that helps you kind of pull together those stories. You mentioned a couple minutes ago that you feel like your family's history has really influenced you.
Right.
Um, Tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, as far as the listening part, I think that goes back to Sunday meals. In
Yeah.
my One of the good memories, great memories I have of visiting here. So when, my parents, my brother, sister, and I'm the oldest of three, lived in North Carolina. The times that we were able to come out to California, it was for summer vacations. And so I remember lots of, meals around my grandmother's table, my mom's mom, and then her mom, my great grandmother, maternal great grandmother was still living at the time, and the extended family would go to her home here in Roseville, the one that I mentioned earlier, and being that it was summertime and warm, and the younger cousins, second cousins of mine, running around the home, and just people, just aunts and uncles, just sitting around a table outside because my great grandmother's home was so small. But there was lots of food coming out of the kitchen. I remember Grandma Lupe was her name, or is her name, and just remember picturing her in the kitchen cooking, as much as she could for all the family that was kind of rotating in and out of visiting that day. And so, you hear the stories, as a kid, certain stories, you cling on to more than others, when you're not running around, chasing each other. But definitely, yeah, I've definitely have grown to try to pay attention more. There's a quote that I heard a long time ago from Stephen Covey about, listening to understand versus to be understood, and it's
Mm.
something that while it's a work in progress at all times to try to
Yeah.
be that person, but to understand, where the person that's speaking is coming from, or what their point of view is, and of course when it comes to family stories, it's a little bit easier to just sit back and listen. And so now I have my one grandfather that's still alive, and so on Sundays, going back to the Sunday meals, we still get together with him. Actually, Sundays at 4 p.m. is usually the time for that, and we go, and he definitely loves to share his stories. And although they're sometimes on repeat, God bless him,
Yeah.
95 years old, you kind of,
He
I
gets to
think
repeat himself. Yeah.
yeah, he gets to repeat himself exactly. And a lot of us, my aunts, my uncle, my parents, my cousins, we all know the story, but you know, he lives alone, so it's you get to
Yeah.
uh, well, he used to live alone. Now he has some family, extended family living with him, but there's you get to that, I guess, that age, and you earn the right to share the stories that you want to share. So.
Oh, yeah, and hearing them, every time. I remember my late grandfather, he was the best storyteller, and it was every time was fresh, and it would be kind of exciting because you knew what was going to happen next. And
Yeah,
he was a little bit of a prankster when he was a young man, and so his stories were always really feisty, which is kind of
yeah,
fun.
yeah. And I think it also becomes kind of a rite of passage as well as a responsibility to learn
Yeah.
the stories of those that came before you, so that those that are after you will have some kind of understanding of where they came from. So
Yeah.
that really something that resonates strongly with me as well. So
Well, and that's kind of the perfect segue into one of the reasons I really wanted the listeners to get to meet you and hear about what the work that you do is your work in the coaching sphere, and these themes of mentoring and leadership. It sounds like it's something that's not just in the coaching or just in your work, but something that's kind of a legacy handed down through your family.
yeah, so I think it kind of starts off with everybody's influenced me, obviously. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, my parents, my mom, dad. But when it comes to who do I believe that I most took after, in the sense of serving others, it's hard not to think of my dad. My dad is, like I said, a physician, or I mentioned earlier, because of his work. We left San Diego area when I was had just finished up kindergarten, and he found a residency program, an opening in Wilmington, North Carolina, and so his career was in medicine, in plastic reconstructive surgery. And so growing up, I always heard stories about my dad when it came to his bedside manner.
Mm.
Many of us can attest to going to a medical appointment, being seen by a doctor or nurse, and maybe not being receiving the best bedside manner. And
Yeah.
so I do remember often hearing, oh, people meeting someone, and they would say, oh, you're Dr. Nava's son. Oh, Dr. Nava's, one of the best, and they would, tell me the stories about what made him so great. And that was, his listening, his bedside manner, the care that he shared or showed each patient. And so I got into the world of coaching because I do have two boys, and I grew up playing sports. And comes a time when you sign up your child to play a recreational sport, and recreational sports are predominantly run by volunteers, and so
Mm.
volunteers needed to coach a team, right? And my oldest son had played a couple of years, and I had a coach, and that coach, I believe, was in law enforcement, and so he had moved to a new town, and so this next fall we had registered our oldest, and we received an email from the registrar. And this is a very common story that I've heard from so many fellow coaches that have gotten into the world of coaching, especially coaching youth sports. Is your child will not have a team, or will not be playing this year unless somebody steps up. And so after season two of sitting on the sidelines, I decided to volunteer. I had grown up playing soccer, and this was for soccer for my oldest, and played ever since I was little, all the way through high school. And of course, adult rec leagues and things like that. I had also played baseball. Didn't enjoy it as much, but and basketball, and went as far as I could into my high school. But soccer was the sport that just was closest to me and the most knowledgeable. So I felt somewhat comfortable signing up and raising my hand. Um, and then fast forward, to a time when recreational sports transitions to competitive. My
Mm.
younger son, I had actually signed up my younger son to play an indoor league. It's just a small, like 7v7 indoor league. And a gentleman said, "Hey, I saw that you're organizing this league. Would you like to, or do you have room for my son?" So we got together, and we ended up co-coaching that indoor league. And that gentleman ended up being the coach that was going to coach the competitive age group that my younger son. So 2009. So in the soccer world and the youth sports world, it's based for at least in our area here, it's based off of the birth year. So my younger one was on track to do recreation again, just like we had been. I had not been introduced to the world of competitive sports, and that other coach had said, well, I know you said that you're going to sign him up to do rec, but I would love to see him at the tryouts, just so that I can compare him or other players to him, using him as a reference point on skill set and things like that. Um, Ends up being where my youngest one ended up on the team, and I wasn't upset about that. Just
I
it was a
bet.
good way to get into that, to the more
Yeah.
competitive.
Hmm.
And just time goes on. I ended up being an assistant coach there, but my work, I was commuting about 55 miles each way, so I couldn't
Wow.
commit to being a head coach at that time. And life just happens. Things change. I ended up getting a job locally in Roseville. That coach ended up, coaching a couple of years, but transitioned out, and I raised my hand to coach on the competitive side. Um, and competitive coaching is definitely new a new beast. There's a lot of expectations, a lot more than, recreational. And that's where, I knew that if I wanted to stay in this role, I would definitely need to work on myself. But from coaching, the sport as well as coaching the player. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I pride myself in, coaching the player. You recognize that
Yeah.
no two players are the same. Um,
Mm-hmm.
each player has their challenges, their expectations, self-inflicted, inflicted from parents, and their perceived perception of what they are supposed to do by their peers or their coach. So it's a juggling act of coaching the sport as well as coaching the player times 15, 16, 17 players. So
Wow. Wow. And what
yeah.
ages have you coached through the years?
Oh, well, my youngest, when I transitioned or when I started with the recreational side, he must have been about 9, 10 years old.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then now, and this is an interesting scenario, but not too common, at least not from a volunteer perspective, but I continue to volunteer coach despite my own boys deciding that they didn't want to play anymore. And so while that was hard for
Mm,
me and my wife, we
yeah.
we definitely wanted to see our sons, play sports through high school. They are their own individuals as well, and so there was a lot of back and forth over the years, and maybe in a few bribes here and there, but they held strong. Finally, each of them on their own, and you just come to a point as a parent to say, that it has to be their decision, and if it's
Mm-hmm.
not fun for them or if it's not what they're interested in, you have to come to terms with that, and that's what I've done or tried to do. But to answer your question about the age groups, I'm currently still coaching the 2009, so they are
Okay.
U17. So young men that
Wow.
are, have turned or turning 16 years old. That's the older spectrum, and then I have two teams. The younger ones are 2011s, so young men that were born 2011, and so they
Okay.
are they are Gen Alpha, and I am reminded of that every time they speak to each other in their language.
You have to catch up a little bit and,
Oh, I
and
have to
learn some
catch up every
lingo.
day. Yes,
Yeah.
all the time. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm always playing catch up on that. So
So you mentioned that you knew when you were moving into coaching, especially at the competitive level, that you were going to need to kind of equip yourself, not just in the sport, but in that, development of the person, those skills
mhm.
as well. So what kinds of things, did you do or are you still doing to help grow yourself in those areas?
Sure. And then let me rephrase that. Let me correct myself. I would say that I didn't know.
Oh, okay.
It was a
Yeah.
something that I had to I realized, and growing as an individual myself and as a coach. There's one lots of lessons learned along the way. It's not it hasn't been always a nice, easy ride. There are, especially with younger players, there are parents or situations that will challenge you. I remember coaching my younger one, Lucas, and his team. And we were the second team. So for those that may not be familiar, in most or many clubs will have a first team and a second team for an age division, if not more. So you have the most competitive players try out, and they make the first team. And I was so in this
Okay.
scenario, I was the coach of the second team at that time. And so we're playing against a strong team that we were away, and it's hot. I remember my assistant coach standing next to me, and we're being challenged. The boys are just being challenged on the field. I had pulled out a player, and within a second or two, I had a text, and I've since learned that not to check my phone during games. But it was from a parent that had said, "Why are you pulling out?" He used his name, his son's name. "Why are you pulling out? My son." And that just caused me to have some kind of panic and anxiety, because here I am trying to
Mm,
coach, a team, and but also, receiving instantaneous feedback from a parent, right? And so,
yeah.
uh, uh, it has worked out. I've learned that was a lesson, but at the moment in time, it just caused me such anxiety to the point where I don't remember if, how well I gave the halftime talk at that point of that game. It was just, that was a first half type of or an event that took place in the first half, and here I am trying to come together and
Yeah.
coach, but all of that's in the back of my mind is, what conversations to come after the game. And
Oh,
so,
yeah.
things like that, if veteran coaches will tell you, and I've counseled newer coaches, like, when it comes to interacting with parents, you want to set a guideline at the beginning of the year of, let's take 24 hours, after a game. If there's something that I will, I tell all the teams at the beginning of the year, I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be perfect. I will do my best. I'm always trying to do what's best for the team and the player. But if there's something that needs to be discussed, let's schedule something, at least 24 hours later. And that comes
Mm,
from just, recognizing that people, parents, and I'm not faulting anyone. They're invested in
sure.
their child's success and they want to see their son or daughter be successful. But when it comes to an emotional situation that, might, a frustration or something that is perceived that I did wrong, it's probably best that we take the emotion out of it, with a little bit of a time gap.
Have a sleep. Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
That's so important. I think that's a great rule. I think maybe we all should apply that in some way when we're upset at something that's happening in the moment to just
yeah,
kind of take a beat.
yeah. Um, so to answer, I guess, your original question of where do I get, I guess, my education or understanding of how to help the players. Um, it's everything. It's conversations with other coaches. I always try to surround myself with coaches that have played the game. One of my director of coaches and someone that's become a good friend of mine is a former Sacramento Republic player. He played in the at that level, so he has a lot of experience on the field. I may have a higher certificate than him, but to be honest, it's not about certificates. It's about experience.
Mhm.
Other volunteer coaches that have been in my boat, and we talk about how do we handle different scenarios. Um, I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and I have listened to this one, as well as I had mentioned my commute. I
Yeah.
quickly learned, I think it may have been somebody like Zig Ziglar that mentioned automobile university. And so if I was going to be in a car for an hour minimum each way to work, uh,
Mhm.
should I use it to listen to talk radio and music, or could I use it to invest in myself? And so I had
Mhm.
decided to, um, subscribe to audiobooks and just started downloading and listening to the likes of Zig Ziglar. Was probably one of the biggest ones, the first ones. Dave Ramsey for financial, advice.
Mhm.
That's transitioned to Gary Vaynerchuk, to David Goggins, and I've read all these, people's books. Simon Sinek, just all the modern day great individuals. Mel Robbins, I've listened to her podcast, and just what can I glean from all these individuals to then pass on to those that I coach. So,
Yeah.
and then of course there's soccer coaches and coaches in general, John Wood and Dean Smith. I grew up in North
Mhm.
Carolina, so college basketball was a big part of my life growing up. So definitely um, Krzyzewski, a lot of great coaches, and how they coached and what did they do in different scenarios. So yeah, it's
Well,
just a lot of combinations of things.
If you're listening to How Would You Rate Your Pain, you're probably a person who understands the power of talking through the issues that we're going through. I'm really excited to let you know about BetterHelp, an online therapy platform. I'm not one of their therapists, but very thankful they sponsor this show. Wherever you are, BetterHelp will match you with a licensed therapist who can listen and help you through whatever you're going through. It's flexible and entirely online. Listeners of the show can get started with 10% off the first month by clicking the link in the show notes or by going to betterhelp.com/Tiffany Bartell.
Well, and I think that's something that I learned about you early on in us getting to know each other. So we are related through your wife. And that idea of the continuous learning and continuous improvement, which is really important to me. We found pretty early on that we had that in common, which makes it really fun to be accountability buddies because
Yes.
yeah, because we expect a lot out of ourselves and hopefully in a kind way. But I'd be so sad if I thought I would arrive and not have more to learn.
Yeah.
So what would you say are some of like your like biggest lessons learned, maybe about yourself or about how to support your players through all the experiences you've had, but then also the information that you glean?
Wow.
Not to
That
put
that
you on the spot.
no, that's a great question. A lot of things come to mind. I think going back to that each player, each family, each player and their parents, respective parents,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that's a challenge. You have I've had a handful of players that have parents that are no longer together. So the challenge and
Yeah.
dichotomy of interacting with both and trying to keep everyone on the same page when maybe they're not necessarily on the same page. So,
Yeah.
but you recognizing that I am not, I don't, while I strive to be a great coach in the sport because I have coached soccer, basketball, baseball. Um, I recognize that I'm not going to be the greatest mind of the sport itself, but what I can do is get to know the player and the team and dynamics um, at ground level, like you and try to be as successful as we can as a team together at this moment in time. So for this year, the soccer year uh, kicks off really in June after May tryouts, and so and actually our club this year decided to have a little bit of a break, both for the players as well as the coaches and staff. And so really this past Monday, the Monday after 4th of July, was truly our official quote unquote start of the soccer year with
Oh,
our
nice.
intense trainings and things like that. And so now, a week in, I've seen, some players that I picked up new to our team, as well as past players or existing players that were on the team, and trying to now, again, how am I going to make all these players gel together?
Yeah.
Who thrives on, um, you know, um, verbal recognition, who
Hmm.
wants to lead the cheer, before, the game, during halftime, after halftime, or who's going to shy away. And so all of those scenarios as a coach, it's, I'm trying to read the player and better understand what makes them tick, what drives
Hmm.
them, so that way I can get the most out of them if that makes sense,
Yeah.
both
Yeah.
as the athlete as well as and I share this with the parents. I'm not just here to coach the sport. I also am doing my best to do what I can to help them better in life.
Hmm.
So much so that all of my players know that I do not accept a handshake that is just you know uh, how would you say you know
Like limp,
Yes,
like a
thank
dead
you.
fish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
dead fish. Thank you. That was
Yeah.
exactly the phrase I was looking for. A dead fish handshake. They all know that, it must be, a firm, solid handshake. They expect them to, look at me or any other coach that they, shake hands with in the eye.
Hmm.
I do as best as I can speak with each player at least once during the week, because on a team of 15 to 16 to 17 players, it's
Yeah.
hard to build a relationship and have a conversation every training session, right? So
Right.
I
Right.
do
Yeah.
my best to interact with each player, one-on-one. Hey, how's it going? How's school? Um, if I am connected by chance with their parent on social media and I see that they were out boating, like, I'll tease them like, hey, how was that training out on the boat? To
Yeah.
get a
Yeah.
smile
Yeah.
out of them, get them to know that
Yeah.
Coach Victor's paying attention. Coach
Hmm.
Victor's not just here to, make them do drills and go home. I tell all of my teams at the end of each, year that I've coached, um, while I may get to a point in my life, I may not recognize you on the road if we're ever walking past each other. If you see me, say hi.
Yeah.
I am your coach. I am somebody that will be a resource to you for the rest of your life, as much as I can be, as much as I'm still walking and breathing. So I
Yeah.
really try to connect with the player.
Well, and those little touches makes a big difference for the relationship, but it also represents like quite a bit of work and
Yeah.
intentionality. So like where do you dig from to find the like energy to be that consistent? Because I know it's really important from conversations we've had. You have a full-time job, but you also want to be connected, in your marriage, connected in your own parenting. You're connected to your extended family. And I mean, I think today we had to schedule this appointment for earlier in the day because you do have family dinner today coming up because it's Sunday. How do you manage all of those pieces?
Um, as best I can,
Good answer.
learning tips and tricks from those that are more productive and squeeze more out of life than me. Like I said,
Mhm.
all those names I mentioned earlier, you listen to any and all of them, they share how they are more productive. I wish I could say that I'm up at 4:30 every day, and starting at, going out for my morning run. No. Have I done it in the past? Yeah, there's been times where I have been fairly consistent for a period of time and gotten up early. It's something I'm working on again to try to, set the day. But it also
Mhm.
starts with, being prepared in the evening and what do I want for the next day. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and not to get in, all of that stuff is great stuff, and that's all, online and can be found by any of those great speakers or authors. But
Mhm.
more for me, what is it? How do I manage all of that? It, I work backwards a lot, and when I say that, it really is, what's going to be my final thoughts, as morbid
Mm.
as that may sound at times.
No, yeah, no, it makes
Um,
a lot of sense.
what are going to be my final thoughts? What's going to be passing through my head as I take my final breaths? And one of the things I hope that is said about me after I'm gone is that Victor was the type of coach that really, cared about the player, the human, the
Yeah,
person, more so than what they, about more so than what they did on the field. That he really helped, provide some kind of stability in each of those players' lives, and
yeah,
that the lessons that I shared with them are things that they are able to share to someone else, whether they coach,
yeah,
whether however they are successful in life. Um, I do think a lot about my time. Especially, I had a milestone birthday this year in February, and anyone that has turned 50 will probably attest that you start to think even more so about how many more summers you have, how many more
mm,
Christmases you have, how many more years of coaching will I coach.
yeah,
And it is a full-time commitment. I am very blessed to be able to work for the city of Roseville. I work in information technology, and I work 7 to 4:30 most days, and it's often a quick transition at home to get to the field by 5 or 5:30, And
Yeah.
last year, at least, I was there 3 to 4 nights a week from
Wow.
5:30 to 9, helping
Wow.
close fields. So I do. I am internally challenged at times with the amount of time that I spend there versus with my own two sons, with my wife. I try to counter that by connecting with them through, like just yesterday, we went stand-up paddleboarding, which is one of my favorite
I
pastimes.
saw the pictures. It looked so
Yes,
fun.
yes. Um, and things like that. So where I am truly disconnected from soccer or from
Hmm.
coaching, um, and giving the right amount of attention to my own wife and boys, and then like you said, uh, the family time that
Yeah.
it's I try to be one of the grandchildren that is there regularly for my grandfather, and uh, it's just something you just have to be conscientious about. And sometimes you do have to forgive
Mm.
yourself, be willing to
Yeah.
recognize that you can't be in all places at all times.
Yeah. Yes and no are two sides of the same coin, right? So if you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. But I can also hear how much personal like satisfaction and enjoyment you get from investing in those around you. And it kind of seems like a theme of, whether you're investing in your family, your extended family, your players, this idea of, you know, um, investing and caring for others and being connected. It sounds like it
Yes.
shows up in a lot of areas of your life. So I always ask people who come to this show, what's the hardest part about the coaching work that you do? And then what's the most rewarding?
Hardest part. Mm, Hardest part is probably recognizing that you're not going to meet everyone's expectations.
Oof. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. When I the 2011 team, I am the head coach of that team. I am also currently the head coach of the 2009 team, but I'm working my way to having another coach kind of take over that team. Since my son no
Okay.
longer is on that team, I didn't want to totally disappear for those players. I have
Yeah.
built a relationship with many of them, but I also recognize, again, I can't be in multiple places, and the 2011 team is the first team for that age division. So, and I'm the head coach. And so, it's analogous to you can say a high school environment where you're the varsity coach for the school, and you also have to be somewhat aware of the players of the second team, and then in this 2011 age division, there's a third team, and
Oh,
um,
wow. Okay.
being available to those other two coaches and all of the families, and so there's a
A lot of
responsibility
responsibility.
for a
Hmm.
first team coach, and so. Um, to your question about what's the hardest part, just recognizing that different players are at different levels with
Mm.
their skill sets. They all contribute. Some parents want to see their players be, in a position to make a college team, or at least,
Yeah.
being visible to college coaches. And I'm learning what that means through support of my club, through other coaches. But those 2011s, half of them are freshmen this year, half of them are still
Okay.
eighth graders. So as a first team coach, learning what the expectations are of the players and the parents is huge. Um,
And then
recognize,
managing that
yeah,
because it doesn't, like you said, you can't always meet every expectation.
right.
Yeah.
Um, Recognizing that, I do need help with that. And that I am not the smartest person in the room. I need to make sure that there's others that are smarter than me in that. So I
Hmm.
do rely, like I said, on other resources, other coaches, directors of coaches within our club, um, and I I do. my best with the best intent, and that's what I share with families. And sometimes
Yeah.
that is recognized, and sometimes, there's some challenges that come my way. Um, but yeah, so there's that. So that's probably one of the challenges. The
Yeah.
joys is, I mean, there's so much joy from coaching. It's this 2011 team, when I became the head coach, they were the second team in the age division, just because of attrition changes. The first team coach at that time is no longer coaching, and so I became the first team coach, and it was an easy transition. But then it becomes,
Yeah.
oh, so now I have to make the hard decisions on who is selected and who may need to play on the second team this year versus being on the first
Okay.
team last year. Um,
Yeah.
being direct with players, in not in where they're falling short and where they need to what they need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
Having challenging players at times that may be disrupting, the team dynamics. Um, the uh, but when you overcome those things and you
Yeah.
do have a successful game or a successful stretch of games, or you maybe even more joy is when the team has been challenged, and then we come, and it's not just about W's, wins. It's
Yeah.
about seeing the team, working together, um,
Mm-hmm.
overcoming a deficit, and they seeing the joy on their faces, and um,
Their
I can
pride
get,
of themselves.
yes,
Yeah.
and I can get fired up. That's a challenge as well, as how much does a coach on the sideline?
Mm-hmm.
I very much
Yeah.
was one of those joystick type of coaches, and through my own coaching education, have done my best to become a coach that um, prepares the players through the week and allows
Mm-hmm.
them to execute and perform on the weekends. Um, we do a
Yeah.
lot of reflection as a team. I do lot of reflection as a coach. Um, and so it's the growth. I tell the
Mm-hmm.
players all the time. I mean, as cliche as it sounds, it's a journey. It's not, we're not satisfied with last week's win. We want to constantly be improving. Um, the biggest opponent is usually ourselves in how
Yeah.
successful we are. So all those things I mentioned that I have read or heard or you know um, received from other individuals, other resources. That's the stuff I try to
Yeah.
share with my teams, my players.
Well, and I know that it must make a difference. My children didn't do sports, but they did music, which is kind of a counterpart, in some ways, because
Mhm.
it can be competitive and it can be really involved or not, it can be more casual. But I always thought that the my goal for them was their character
Mhm.
and being able to practice and to do hard things and to overcome challenges and to know that they can find the motivation to do something that they want to accomplish.
Sure.
And I know sports is like that for so many people, and they may not become a professional athlete, but you need tenacity and you need the ability to take feedback throughout your life. And so if we could practice that early on, as
Yeah.
a therapist, I work with adults who maybe didn't have the experience of being mentored into how to receive feedback. So
No,
it's
I'm
easier to
glad you
do when you're
mentioned that.
little.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the persistence, and what is another joy that uh, I'm able to experience, it's seeing one of my players' confidence grow. Um, there's
Mm,
definitely, whether it's for fear of a tackle on the field,
yeah,
or not being the most vocal, and being okay with falling back behind 15, 16 other players, and never wanting
yeah,
to be in the middle or center of an example or demonstration. If I ask players to demo something, you have those that are always willing to volunteer, and
yeah,
I equate that to those that may always be willing to present in a work team meeting. And then you have those players that never raise their hand, and I equate that to, you know, a professional that, you know, may be okay just letting their teammates, you know, professional teammates, you know, do all the meetings and all the presentations. And I grew up being, you know, I am the oldest of three. You know, definitely the stereotypical kind of, you know, take care of your siblings, but
Yeah.
not ever really bringing the attention to me. I wasn't one of those kids that just, you know, wanted attention on me. Had self-doubts a lot,
Mhm.
and so I that's where the coaching slash fatherly stuff comes from. I think, you know, I want the players that I have the opportunity to have a little bit of influence over, become better
Mhm.
individuals, and you kind of equate it to, you know, life after high school, and will
Yeah.
can I help them be more confident in whatever they do? So, you know, there's that part of it as well, of wanting to, you know, share a little bit of wisdom or experience,
Mhm.
and, you know, help them be, you know, navigate, you know, middle school and high school,
Oof. Yeah.
better than what I felt like I did. You know, and I was definitely not an introvert, but at the same time, I wasn't one that sought attention. And so,
Mhm.
like I said, going back to very early in our conversation, you just recognize certain things about certain players. And so,
Yeah.
you know, some of the things I've done is, you know, listen to podcasts about child development so I can be better aware of what's
Mm.
going on in the 14-year-old brain. You know, even though I
So
was,
much.
yeah, I was a 14-year-old boy, and I have my own two boys, but, you know, uh,
Yeah.
I definitely can't be aware of, you know, everything that might be going through a player's head. So try to do
Yeah.
my
So
best to.
much preparation. Yeah, and then the context of the age and developmentally what's happening for them, I think is so important. Okay, so as we get ready to wrap up, what is some advice that you would have for those who might be working with, um, children and teenagers in kind of a mentorship or coaching, capacity? Because that can take a lot of different forms, whether
Sure.
it's teaching or tutoring or youth groups or sports or whatever. What wisdom do you have to share?
Um, I still feel like I'm learning, um, and
Yeah,
that's a
so
good
stay
thing.
humble.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm always learning. The youth will definitely teach you a lot of things, through experience or through trial and error. No, but I think it's if I had to narrow it down to a couple things. One is being willing to, you know, continue your own education. Like I said, I gravitate towards a lot of productivity, business, self-help type of content and material,
Hmm.
um, and that's what has been my educator, as well as, you know, peers, on how to coach youth. Um, Being a stable individual in those children, in those players' lives, I think goes a long
Hmm.
way. I
Yeah.
very rarely miss any activity, and if I do, then, you know, an assistant coach or another staff person from our club definitely fills in. But I communicate that, you know, to the families, you know, as you know, as far ahead of time as I can. I am um, the players have learned that while I'm always wanting to be at a personable level, I still believe in um, a recognition of, I think, what's the right word? Not authority, but you know, I grew up saying yes, ma'am, and no, sir, growing up in North Carolina. And while that's not the
Yeah.
common practice here in Northern California, I still do believe that there should be some respect for you know, those that are older
Those in
or,
leadership.
yep, in
Yeah.
leadership.
Hmm.
And so that I try to instill that in the players. Like, you know, if they are being instructed by another coach, make sure you give them their full attention. You're looking at them, eyes, things like that. So a bit of rambling, but I think to answer the question about advice to those that want to coach, if you want to coach, sign up. I mean, there's such a need, especially at the
Yeah.
recreation level. Be willing to make mistakes for sure. Know that
Yeah.
you have to do a lot of self-reflection. Preparedness definitely helps. Being there on time, having the right gear, those type of things. But be willing to ask those around you for support and advice. There's lots of people that have gone before me, and I recognize that. And when younger coaches, as far as tenure of coaching, or come around, I'm always willing to provide answers to their questions. I do my best not to insert myself, but if somebody has a question that seems like it may not be uh, a lot of us are afraid to ask questions that we think may make us appear dumb or not aware,
Yeah.
or putting ourselves out there to potentially be ridiculed for not knowing the answer, right? And so I always believe that if they ask that question, they're putting it out there, then they truly do need help. And I'll
Yeah.
message coaches off to the side and say, feel free to call me anytime and let me know what questions you have. I've been there. I was that coach that didn't know everything, whether it's the logistics of the how the club does things, or how to interact with parents, or how to interact with players, all of
Yeah.
that. So yeah.
I love that. So ask for help.
Yes.
And realize that in asking for help, you're just joining all the coaches everywhere who all ask for help.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
I don't know of any profession where you don't do that, even at the highest levels. Like we're all, for my field, it's consultation. I probably either give consultation or receive consultation pretty much every week.
Yeah.
And I know teachers do it, and doctors collaborate, but I
Sure.
think there is this idea of everybody else knows everything except me.
Yeah.
And we're all just trying to figure out what to do with whatever's in front of us.
Yeah.
But well, thank you so much for coming on, Victor. I always enjoy our talks, and I'm really excited to share you with everyone who's listening. To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. Be gentle with yourselves, and we'll see you next time.
How Would You Rate Your Pain is a pop media production and is recorded at WaveLength Studios in downtown Chattanooga, Tennessee. Our set is designed by Mad Honey Rentals, graphic design provided by Josh Wilhem at JW Creates. Music is by Michael Crosa. This podcast is not intended to be taken as medical advice and should not take the place of regular therapy. If you have questions about your mental health, see a licensed clinical therapist. I'm Dr. Tiffany Bartell. Please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at How Would You Rate Your Pain. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week for another episode.